which is still...
He said you've got to write it in the Qurayshi dialect, okay?
Yeah.
So there's only one way, according to us.
Yeah, so the seven modes of recitation is not that Qurayshi dialect thing. That's different, okay? That's why I'm saying you need to understand the nuances about researching about this topic. Without that, you won't be able to. And this is exactly the mistake that DCCI make. Because what they do is they listen to certain statements from other scholars, and they do not even realize what these scholars were talking about. So when you talk about the 7 modes of recitation, this is the different ways in which it can be recited. So it can be different words being substituted for other words. It can be, for example, a word which might be used in a different way. The same word might be used in a different way. So do you think that now there are still 7 different ways of reciting the Quran? Yes, still to this day.
Okay.
There you go. So all these Hafs, Warsh, Qalun, all these different ways of reciting, the modes of recitation, is still active to this day.
So you're saying those, they're called Kirat, okay? Am I right? So saying they're called Kirat, okay? Are you saying that those Kirat are actually exactly the same as the Aruf, I think it's called, isn't it? Right? Which is what the ways in which, you know, when Muhammad said you can recite the Quran in 7 different Aruf, is that the correct Arabic term, yeah?
Yes.
So you're saying that Kirat is the same as Aruf?
No, I'm not saying it's the same. Okay. I'm saying the Qira'at, then inside the Qira'at there is these different Ahruf, which shows the reasoning for these differences within that. So there are 2 different things, not the same thing. But the important point is this: all these 7 Qira'at was already revealed to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. You see, in his time, it wasn't something that was invented later on. Like for example, if you look at the Catholic book and the Protestant book, you don't even agree about the number of books in there. Yes? So the Protestants say we have 66 only. The Catholics say no, we have 73 books.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. We're recording this for you for a little bit later. But Brother Mansoor is in a conversation, so I just want to see if we can get this done. Sorry, brother. Record you, brother. Okay, fine. It doesn't want to be recorded. It's a private conversation, so we'll go back to Brother Hashim. Sometimes Dawah is given in private, so you know, sometimes it's best, especially with certain Muslims who come down to ask certain questions. Just bear with me a moment. I'll put this back on Hashim. Grab that for me, bro. Jazak Allah Khair.
Or even from the manuscript from the 1st century, there is no way for anyone to identify what Jesus said from what was found in the 4th century.
Well, this is the whole scholarly study of textual criticism.
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
By comparing the manuscripts and seeing there are some small variations.
No, not small. That's
there
are
small variations between the manuscripts.
My friend.
But by comparing them all, we can deduce what is the original version. Okay.
This is the claim of the Christians, that there are only minor differences. Yeah. But if you look at the actual scholars like Bart Ehrman, what they say is that there are so many. Hear me out.
I think Bart Ehrman would agree that.
Okay, I'll tell you what. I'll tell you exactly what Bart Ehrman said about the number of differences in the. Just put this away. Sorry. The variances that's found in the manuscripts. I'll tell you exactly what Bart Ehrman said. In fact, he says something like there are so many variances. There are as many variances as there are number of words in the New Testament.
Yeah, of course, there are thousands of variants between the thousands of manuscripts.
So they don't agree with each other. That's the point he was making.
You know, if you have, right? Okay, there are thousands of variants between the thousands of manuscripts. Okay.
Okay.
But I think you'll find that Bart Ehrman is pretty happy about the text of the New Testament.
What? I mean, the core of the belief is this exchange between.
Yeah. So I just want to not quote, misquote him.
I'm going to quote Bart Ehrman for you. Okay?
Yeah, go on.
I got right. This is what Bart Ehrman says in. I will just check what I'm going to quote from. So if you want to look it up, you can.
Yeah, give me the reference.
Yourself, okay.
I'll quote from Bart Ehrman in Misquoting Jesus.
Okay, I'm going to quote from Misquoting Jesus as well.
Okay, good. So, you quote first if you want, or I can go first.
Quite a long quote, I'm sorry about this, but it says, he's talking about his co-author, Bruce Metzger, who is also a scholar, okay?
Bruce Metzger was a teacher of Bart Ehrman, did you know that?
That's right, yes.
He was actually a Christian.
He studied under Bruce Metzger.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's
but
right.
Bart Ehrman left Christianity.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay,
so carry on.
It says, Bruce Metzger is one of the great scholars of modern times. And I dedicated the book to him because he was both my inspiration for going into textual criticism and the person who trained me in this field. I have nothing but respect and admiration for him. And even though we may disagree on important religious questions, he is a firmly committed Christian and I am not. We are in complete agreement on a number of very important historical and textual questions. If he and I were put into a room, I'm losing the quote now here. If he and I were put in a room and asked to hammer out a consensus statement on what we think the original text of the New Testament probably looked like, there would be very few points of disagreement, maybe 1 or 2 dozen places out of many thousands. Okay?
So this is not from a book.
So
is this a preface?
This is from Misquoting Jesus, page 252. Okay. Misquoting Jesus, page 252.
Read the last paragraph then.
The position I argue for in Misquoting Jesus does not actually stand at odds with Professor Metzger's position that the essential Christian beliefs are not affected by textual variants in the manuscript edition of the New Testament.
So good. Now we are discussing the actual doctrines of Christianity. So the doctrines remain the same.
That's right.
Okay?
Yeah. He would say there's nothing in
but the
Christian
point that
doctrines
we were discussing, was the actual text itself. Now let's see what Bruce Metzger says.
He says that the last paragraph before that, he says that there would only be 1 or 2 dozen places in the whole of the New Testament, where he and Bruce Metzger would disagree upon what the text of the New Testament is.
No, he says about the teachings. Read that again, the last paragraph.
That's the last paragraph. The paragraph I read before that says, if he and I were put in a room and asked to hammer out a consensus statement on what we think the original text of the New Testament probably looked like, there will be very few points of disagreement, maybe 1 or 2 dozen places out of many thousands.
Okay.
So he's saying all over many thousands of places where you have variants in the manuscripts. He and Professor Metzger would have only maybe 1 or 2,000 places where they would be in disagreement about what the original text is.
The important point there is probably.
Of course.
So this is because he doesn't have the original.
Of course, he doesn't have the original manuscripts,
Yeah.
and therefore he cannot say this is 100% certain.
Yeah.
To what
So
this says.
now we are going on
That's why
probability.
he uses
Now,
the word probably.
yeah, let's see what Bruce Metzger, his teacher, actually says about this. So Bruce Metzger says, sorry, what's it called? Here it is. So this is Bruce Metzger from the New Testament, a historical introduction to the early Christian writings.
Yeah.
Okay? Oh, sorry, that is Bart Ehrman actually. Let me bring up Bruce Metzger. Oh, here it is. So this is, from the same book, the text of the New Testament, its transmission, corruption, and restoration.
Yeah.
This is from Bruce Metzger.
Yeah.
Okay, it says, none of the original documents of the New Testament is extant, and existing copies differ from one another. The textual critic seeks to ascertain from the divergent copies which form of the text should be regarded as most conforming to the original. So you already agree that none of the originals exist.
That's
yes?
right, yeah.
And then there are
Christians would agree with him on that. You know, we don't have the original manuscripts as they're written by the original authors.
And the existing copies differ from one another. Now, the important point is that Bart Ehrman, in Misquoting Jesus, this is what he says. It is one thing to say that the originals were inspired, but the reality is that we don't have the originals. So saying that they were inspired doesn't help me much unless I can reconstruct the originals. This is Bart Ehrman. And then he goes on to say, moreover, the vast majority of Christians of the entire history of the church have not had access to the originals, making their inspiration something of a moot point. Okay, so you can say I'm inspired regardless of that. They don't have the original. So your inspiration is just your claim. No. And then he goes on to say, wait, I haven't finished it. He goes on to say, not only do we not have the originals, we don't have the first copies of the originals. We don't even have the copies of the originals.
I think that's a bit of a claim myself.
All copies of the copies of the originals. Let me finish and then you can say.
Yeah.
Okay? What we have, I'll let you finish. I'll let you finish. You let me finish the quote and then we can talk about, because it's important you listen to what Bart Ehrman is actually saying.
Carry on.
Okay, so what he's saying is that not only do we not have the originals, we don't have the first copies of the originals, we don't even have the copies of the originals, or the copies of the copies of the copies of the originals. Yes? What we have are copies made later, much later. In most instances, they are copies made many centuries later. And these copies all differ from one another in many thousands of places.
Yeah,
centuries later.
Okay.
The important point there is centuries later. You know, in one video, I actually heard
there are
Bart Ehrman say,
manuscripts which are used, which are centuries after. Yes, true.
you know how many centuries after?
There are some which are centuries.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. Hijab's about to go into a conversation, so we'll be back live, hopefully with that in a moment. Keep tuned, inshallah.
How many years after?
56, I think, is the latest figure or whatever, yeah. So
That's a moot
most
point.
of those would not be within the first 2 centuries.
So when is your...
They will be from 300,
where is your...
500, 600, 700, 800, 900, 1000 AD, etc. Yeah.
The bulk of the manuscripts is from which century? Do you know? Or after which century?
I would say probably from after 500 AD. Will probably
Sorry,
the
after?
majority of them will definitely be from after 500 AD, I would say. Yeah?
Actually,
okay.
more further than that.
Okay, I'll give it to you.
I heard Bart Ehrman actually state this.
Yes.
He said majority, he said 94% or something like that, of the manuscripts of the New Testament are from the 9th century onwards.
Okay.
9th century. You know how many years? That is nearly a millennia after Jesus.
No, 800 onwards. Okay.
Yes?
700 years after Jesus.
Nearly a millennia after Jesus.
Okay.
Now you tell me, by the way, let me finish the last paragraph he says.
Okay.
He says these copies differ from one another in so many
It's the same
places.
with the Quran. There are more manuscripts the later you go.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we have everything.
That is normal.
Remember,
That's
we
normal, isn't it?
we have 2 modes of preservation. So
Yeah.
our most important or the primary mode of preservation has always been the oral tradition. And we have the names. We have the names of the people.
Yeah.
The
And
chain of.
that is the problem, isn't it?
No, it's not. We have the
It is
chain
the
of
problem
transmission. We have the
because
chain of transmission, which means.
You do not know that what you're reciting now is the same.
Of course we do.
as recited
Of course we do.
In the first centuries of
In fact,
Islam.
we don't only know.
But you have no proof of it.
My friend, I said we have the first century manuscripts. We have the first century Al-Hijra manuscripts.
Manuscripts can prove
Hold on.
what you're reciting.
We have the
now
first
is
century Al-Hijra
from
manuscripts.
certain
You're not listening.
Yeah.
We have the first century Al-Hijra manuscripts, which you don't have from the first century. We have from the first century of our Prophet. You don't have first century from Jesus.
The first century manuscripts that you're referring to, probably Sana, yeah? Okay.
No, not only Sana. We have the top copy, the Sana. We have the Birmingham manuscripts.
First century, is it?
Sorry?
Top copy is not from the first century of Islam.
First century Al-Hijra. It is from the first century Al-Hijra. Yes.
Top copy
It is from
the
within.
first century
It is.
of Islam.
Of course it is.
No, it's not.
Top copy in the first century.
He was saying that if he and Bruce Metzger had to hammer out the original text of the New Testament, they would not disagree that in more than 1 or 2 dozen places.
Yeah.
At the most.
You know what?
Yeah.
Bruce Metzger was his teacher.
Yes.
Yes?
That's right.
But afterwards, when Jesus says, not Jesus, Bart Ehrman says in the same book that there are as many differences in the manuscript as there are number of words in the New Testament.
Yeah, that's right, because there are hundreds and thousands of manuscripts, so of course there are hundreds.
So how do you
of
reconcile if you have
thousands
hundreds of thousands of
variations.
differences?
We know there are many variations. You know, some manuscripts they have abbreviations, which other manuscripts
No,
don't
no,
have.
not abbreviations. These are
Some
major
manuscripts
differences.
Have this and the other, etc. Of course, and then there are of course mistakes that people made when they were copying. When they
These copies.
accidentally left out a word or
Listen,
whatever. Yeah.
these copies differ from one another in so many places that we don't even know how many differences there are. Possibly it's easiest to put it in comparatives. There are more differences among our manuscripts than there are words in the New Testament. Bart Ehrman in misquoting Jesus. Now, the same goes with the Old Testament.
That's right, because there are 1.5 billion whatever words. Okay, and from that they have so many 100,000 variants. Okay, but that is not a lot.
That is a lot.
Not a lot.
Because if you look at the example that Bart Ehrman gives in his book.
If we were to look at manuscripts of the Quran, we would find an equally a similar proportion.
No, you wouldn't. Definitely not.
Of variants.
Definitely not.
Because there are many variants within the.
Okay, quote me one scholar who says there are as many differences as there are.
I can't quote your scholars.
Well, you quoted Bart Ehrman, so I'm sure you're making a statement about the Quran. You should back it up.
And what I'm saying is there are variants in the Quran.
Bring your evidence. That's a claim you made, so bring your evidence, substantiate it. If you can't, then let's leave it at that until you have the evidence. Because the differences are, like I said, in in the vowels, for example. Like the alif is written different way. So if you're looking at hundreds of manuscript which has hundreds of alifs in it,
But I
which is the most common letter.
That you go and have a look at, for example, Dan Brubaker's books.
I told you, there are people who have already refuted his
In
claim.
which he looks at variants between the ancient manuscripts of the Quran, and he's not just a vowel missing here or whatever, yeah. He sees words missing, words added, words changed, etc. And a whole, more than even one word, often several words at once. Okay, so that
there's a brother.
That is clear evidence.
No,
that
it's
there
not.
are variations or variants
In fact,
within
all
the
these
Quranic
can be looked into,
Yes,
and
yes.
there is already a brother who's made a video against it.
Okay.
Go and watch it. I think it's a brother Farid from Bahrain who has made a clip on Brubaker's mistakes that he has made in his book. In his book, which he claims there are variances in the Quranic manuscripts. Yes, if you look at even that small clip of his, you'll see how unscholarly that work is of Brubaker. That he makes claims which anyone who is even, by the way, Brother Farid is not even a scholar in the manuscript, but even he could pick out like how flimsy these claims of Brubaker are.
Yeah.
So go and look it up. Besides, Jesus was a messenger. Do you not agree?
Jesus God.
Did he claim to be God in any of the?
Yes.
Where did he claim?
Answer to that.
Where did he
I don't
claim?
want to get into a separate debate on the Trinity with you.
No, it's not. It's just about It's just about Jesus' own statements, which would actually go against what he just said.
He keeps saying the one who sent me.
Sorry, I've got a message from my brother about my other brother who is in hospital, so I've got to go.
No
Sorry,
problem.
Hashim.
This is a modern way of saved by the bell.
Yeah, I am saved by the bell.
Saved by the
Right,
text
yeah.
message.
But thanks
All right, no
for
problem. What's your
speaking
name?
with
Sorry.
me. My name's Julian.
Julian, very nice speaking to you. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, you're
Hopefully
welcome.
we'll take up the divinity of Jesus next time if you're free.
I know that's your favourite subject.
Inshallah. All right.